consulting,
Pardon me, Joyce.
that's
sorry about that.
okay, to the consulting community. And again, it's a process. It requires sponsorship by other CMCs and FIMCs, and it is definitely worth the effort of doing. There are also some other national awards, including the National Service Award and the Distinguished Service Award and the Certificates of Appreciation. So if there are folks, again, whom you think are deserving of these awards, please go to the website www.imcusa.org/awards and take a look at all of the different awards that we offer. Finally, I want to talk about the International Constantinus Award. And it is an award that is given internationally by the ICMCI. Actually, it's not. It's sort of, how shall I say it? It's kind of judged by the ICMCI, and the ICMCI supports it, and it is an organization that is dedicated to recognizing outstanding consulting engagements. So if perchance you have you yourself have tremendous results that you've achieved through working with an international client, please, this is the time to contact me, and I will send you the application so that you can apply to be recognized with an International Constantinus Award. There's a wide variety of different categories, and I can give you the judging criteria. I talked about it briefly, I believe, at last year's award ceremony, if you happen to have been there. I'm happy to send you that slide deck. We don't really have time to go through that whole thing right now, but I just want to end by saying I thank John Anderson and Frank McShane very much for giving me this time to talk to you about the power of recognition. Because when we take the time and make the effort to recognize others, everybody wins. We win because we get to feel good. The person who's being awarded wins because it's obviously another feather in their cap. It's something else that they can put onto their CV or resume. And certainly the IMC wins because it is even greater because it has these wonderful folks who support it as you have. So I thank you very much for the time and for your attention. Thanks, Frank. Unfortunately, I have another meeting to go to, so I sincerely appreciate the time, and I look forward to seeing you all at the next meeting. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you, Joyce. I
Frank.
appreciate it. Very good. And so your contact is joyce@hermangroup.com.
It is. I'm also on LinkedIn if you want to link with me.
Right.
Nice to see you all, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Joyce.
Okay. So now we're going to move on to our innovation talk, which is our guest is Chuck Roxin today, who's going to be speaking on that. And Chuck is, he's been around consulting a while. He founded his firm in 1983. He is a CMC with our organization. Over the years, he's worked with every kind of business from startups through growing firms, Fortune 500 companies, M&A, and other exits. Chuck has participated in all stages of those businesses. And prior to that, he held management positions, not only in business, but in the not-for-profit and public sectors. He brings to these clients 3 decades of experience, perspective, and professionalism, and a keen sense of humor. So, Chuck, I'm going to turn this over to you, and you have the innovation talk for about 10 minutes or so.
Thank you very much, and I'll definitely limit it to 10 minutes. I'm going to share my screen now. Thank you so much for enabling that.
You bet.
And I was asked to talk about difficult clients with us and also give it a spin with a sense of humor. This is not easy. It's difficult. Clients are not always funny, but I'll give it a shot here. Anyway, because this is an inside the industry event, I'm going to be sharing with you events with clients that I would not normally share with the public, for example. Anyway, so very often we are in the crosshairs with a difficult client, and irony is actually the most frequent kind of humor that I've found in my consulting experience over time. First of all, I want to dedicate my remarks today to the man who introduced me to the concept of irony in consulting, and that is Russell Ackoff. I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Russell Ackoff, but he was my mentor when I was in graduate school at the University of Pennsylvania. And also after I joined the IMC, he would make sure I was doing okay. And occasionally he even referred some clients to me. Look at that smirk. He was a serious scholar, but he also had an impish grin. My favorite view of Russ is his walking away from me, looking over his shoulder back at me, putting up his eyebrows and smirking. Anyway, he said to me one day, he said, "Chuck, you're very serious, but consulting can be fun too. Look for the ironic situation and keep perspective." And irony, of course, is, let's say, a consulting firm that can't manage itself. That's ironic. And there are some pretty big ones that actually fit in that category, but we'll leave that for the moment. A little bit about us. You heard some. I started in 1983 in Rochester, New York, moved to Seattle in 2002. We had a sales office on the West Coast for a long time. I do a lot of judging at the business plan competition at the University of Washington. I've been a technical advisor to 2 investment groups, and I've had a lot of university affiliations as well. This is just, and we're coming up on another year and a half. It'll be 40 years I've been doing this, and I'm not interested in retiring yet. Okay, let's start with, what is a difficult client? A difficult client for me, and you may have your own experience, they don't have a sense of humor. They're not honest. They talk all the time and they won't listen. They don't think there are problems. Even if staff is bailing and they're losing money, they'll blame somebody else for it. And they also misidentify both the problems and the solutions. You know this. What percent of the potential clients have we had that say the problem is communication? Well, the problem was always communication. Well, maybe not. So what I often say to a client is, why did you ask me to come visit you anyway? What's going on? So I'm going to start with, this woman here used to be my office manager. She was 14 when she came to the family, ran away from home, raised her, helped her through college, marriage, graduate school, and we were the real first-time job that she had. I hired her as my office manager. This, as you know, is Paris. And the business part of Paris is back here. This is the part the tourists generally don't go to. I wanted to show you this picture because, yes, Paris has high-rise buildings and it has an office section. Okay, here's what happened. We got a call one morning, 8:30 in the morning, and it was Shelley's strategy that if she got a call that was urgent, she'd throw her hand up in the air like a flag, and I was supposed to pay attention. Whatever else I was doing, I was supposed to give it up and focus on this. So she got this call, her hand went up in the air, and she started writing some things down. Then she turned to me and she said, Chuck, you've got to take this call. Okay, the call came from the managing director of a chemical and pharmaceutical group in Paris. And he's asked me the question, do you do consulting and training and communication? And I said, well, yes, our firm does that. But why are you calling me? What happened before you called me? And there was silence on the other end of the line. And then he said, well, this morning, our VP of production hit and decked our VP of research and development in the front lobby in front of clients and visitors. I'm thinking to myself, what is this? Is this for real? This is a global 500 chemical and pharma company, and his two VPs are getting into a fist fight in the lobby. Okay. So immediately I said, yes. Yes, of course, we can help you. I had no idea what the problem was. So Shelley held up a sign to me, and she had already faxed to the guy a plane reservation. This is in 5 minutes. She had me on a flight to Paris that night. So I left. He met me. I talked with him. I talked with other people. And of course, the problem actually wasn't communication at all. It was a conflict between these two gentlemen over who was going to have control over the production equipment. In a day and a half, we came up with a protocol so that the conflict was eliminated. And then we all went out to celebrate. Of course, I was hoping this was going to turn into a long-term gig. It turned out to be a day and a half gig. Anyway, so we went out to dinner and we were joking and this and that. And the managing director gave me a check for several multiples of what I had asked for. He was so thrilled to get the problem solved. And then he said, and this is the punchline, he said, you know, I'm really sorry, but we can't use you anymore. I said, why? And he said, well, the board of directors has a list of 3 large consulting companies that we are allowed to contract with. And you were an emergency, so we brought you in. But we have to use, and you would have heard the name of the company that they had to use. I'm not going to mention the name. So I looked at him and I said, well, you have a North American headquarters in my hometown. And he said, yes, that's true, we do. He said, I'll tell them to use you. So that was the result of this difficult situation. Anyway, Shelley's just retired from her other job now. It's amazing how time goes. My second case, this is the case of the embarrassing embezzler. It's one thing when you embezzle. It's another thing to be a really stupid embezzler. So here's what happened. There's a family manufacturing business that was in Addison, Illinois, outside Chicago. They called me up and said, we need some help figuring out why we're not more profitable. The father was the CEO, and he had just retired from being CEO, and he'd hired his daughter as CEO and his son as chief technology officer. Their net profit margin was 4%, which was pathetic. The industry average was 8%. So I went in there, did my tour, did my due diligence, looked at their books, studied them, and I said, this is ridiculous. They should be making more money than they are. I don't understand the numbers. So I was going to have to do something I hate to do, which was to make a presentation to them at the end of the day and to say, I have to come back. And they'll say, yeah, typical consultant flies in from the big city. By this time I'd moved to Seattle, flies in from the big city. And instead of solving our problem, he says we have to pay him more money. And I hate to do that. So I'm getting ready to do the presentation, and I go over to the whiteboard, and right down here on the lip of the whiteboard with all the markers is a thumb drive. So I pick up the thumb drive, I put it in my computer, I open it up, and lo and behold, there are 3 sets of financial statements. The one that I had been sent in advance that showed the 4%, the real one, which I could tell, and the third one, which is from which accounts money had been diverted to private numbered accounts. And I said, oh my God, the CFO has been embezzling money. And he left his thumb drive with all the data right here. Now, I should say that my company has had a licensed PI with also a license to pack heat, who does forensic accounting, and nobody would ever guess it when they see her. She moonlights as a high fashion model. And when she comes into companies, she totally disarms everybody because she doesn't look like their stereotype of a private investigator. Anyway, she taught me how to look for things. So when the son and daughter came in, I projected for them the 3 items, and they just looked at it, and I didn't have to say anything. All 3 of them burst out laughing. Then they started jumping up and down and hugging each other. They were so happy because their actual net profit after all expenses and taxes was 17%, not 4%. And the big question then was, well, first of all, the daughter said, see, Dad, we've been doing everything you told us to, and we made a lot of money. They decided just to fire the embezzler instead of prosecuting, which is what most companies do. Their lawyers said they'd lose customers if they did it. So that was nice. The client laughed.
So Chuck, I have to ask you to sort of start to wind down because we got to have room for our inside track presentation coming up with Ken. So I just need to ask you to try to wind down here in the next few minutes.
I'm just going to skip to the very last one.
Thanks.
Less than a minute. Division VP believed he should be the next president of the company because his father was a founder, the entitled executive, I called it. His performance was terrible. We were sent in to approve efficiency and take a look at the staff, but also then I asked him the question, are you happy? Well, he's not, he said, because his wife isn't. I asked him why he wanted to be division president. And he said, well, because his father had been, and he was embarrassed that he wasn't, and his wife didn't believe in him. I said to him, do you want some private personal help? We had a licensed clinical psychologist on staff full-time at that time. This was in Houston. She was in New York. I flew her down that day. He decided to quit, got another job. This was very difficult, but he and his wife were all smiles by the end of a week of intensive therapy. That's it. I wish I had all day to share more stories with you, but that's it. I'm done.
Same here, Chuck, and thank you.
If you have questions, contact me.
Yeah, or you can put questions in the chat if you want to, and we'll come around back to those at the end.
Sure enough.
Okay, thank you, Chuck. Appreciate it. Appreciate you winding that down like that. So our inside track presentation features Ken. And Ken, I'm going to attempt to pronounce your name. I'm assuming it's Lizotte. Is that correct?
Yes.
Close.
Yes, excellent.
Good. And he's going to talk to us about transforming people into thought leaders. Ken is the Chief Imaginative Officer, which I like that title, and founder of Emerson Consulting Group. He's transformed over 450 business experts, consultants, CEOs, attorneys, and professionals into published thought leaders by helping them get books and articles published, obtaining speaking engagements, and becoming the go-to experts sought out by the media. So Ken, we look forward to learning from you on this, and I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask your help with the screen share. My slides do they need to be up completely, is filling the screen, or what's the
If you
What-
go
what
down to
should
the
I do
bottom where it
first?
says share screen,
Share screen.
yeah, and then you'll find that
Oh,
file
there
on
they are.
there. Yeah, then just
Yeah.
double click on that. Double click on your file.
Okay,
There you go.
you guys can see it now?
You can see a part of it.
Okay, I gotta pull it out,
There
right?
you go. Yeah, yeah. And then on the bottom there, if you turn to your, yeah, that's good. We can see that fine.
Right, okay. No, you're not seeing the slideshow part, right? I haven't
You go down to
started.
the bottom, you'll see the little screen icon down on the very bottom of your screen,
Yeah,
of the PowerPoint screen. Just click on the little.
Way over to the
screen.
right.
A
over
little
to the
further
right,
right. Next, yeah, nope, went too far. Right there. Click on that.
slideshow.
There you go.
Great. Okay. Thank you, thank you.
You bet.
I hated to have us cut Chuck off because we've all had these clients.
Yeah.
God help us. I don't think you can get enough help on how to have a sense of humor when you're dealing with these clients. But anyway, thank you for having me here. Thought leading, the art of separating yourself from the competitive pack. I've actually been using this title for presentations and articles for years. Because really, once I hit upon it, it felt like that really is what this is all about, becoming a thought leader and how you become one and what it can do for you. So that's what I'll be explaining. And this is me, of course, CMC. And let me make sure I have my bearings here. I'm going to go to the next slide. Okay,
There we
great.
go.
So now I can get started. So first, I'm going to start with the gifts of thought leading. I mean, I suppose I should mention what thought leading is in my mind. Thought leadership is, really like it sounds, that you are a leading thinker, but also a leading practitioner. In our case, in the world of management consulting, and how you get there is what I want to focus on, but with a little bit of a preliminary on why it's important or how it works. So here are what I call the gifts of thought leading, and there are a few bullets here for me to pull up. But the first one is get prospects to contact you. You heard I almost said call because I first learned this from Alan Weiss years ago. Maybe some of us also heard him say it, but years ago, he was talking about getting prospects to call, as he said back in those days, you, and contact you is what it's about. And that's what being a thought leader can do. That means no phone call or no cold calls, no direct mail, no advertising, none of that stuff that's hard in terms of reaching out and looking for a needle in a haystack and all the things of that nature. I've tried this stuff maybe 3 times in 25 years and it didn't work. And so the one thing that has worked is practicing thought leading. Another gift of being a thought leader is that you will have more peaks and fewer valleys. I'm not going to say you never have valleys, but you're going to be able to know how to climb out of them a lot better, and you're not going to have as many. Before I read the next one, I'll just say what I found, and the reason why there's more peaks and fewer valleys is that you will always have qualified prospects before you. And when I really got started on this 25 years ago, ever since then, I always had at least a handful of qualified prospects that had come my way. So once you have that, and once you do your thing in terms of trying to land your prospects as a client, you can, in the process, also raise your prices and fees and dictate terms and conditions. This is literally true. Some of you may already do this very well, but for a lot of people, they feel like they have to structure their fees alongside what their competition might be. But I found that the value of being a thought leader, that the value that's projected allows you to be seen as the only person or the only practitioner in your particular field, even though, you know, anyone would logically know there are others, but by and large, they're not shopping around when they come to me. And on the heels of Chuck's thoughts about clients from hell, you could turn some business down. That's almost the sweetest part of the whole process, it seems to me, when I can turn some business down. So here's the question: does it really work? And here's what I say in response to that. There's been a fair amount of research on companies and individuals that practice thought leading and how their bottom line is healthier than others. In my book, The Expert's Edge, I have a second chapter is called The ROI of Thought Leading, the return on investment of being a thought leader. And it has 5 or 6 research and surveys of different kinds that have come to that conclusion over the years. And the second piece that's important is that anecdotal evidence would agree with all of that. I can certainly give you anecdotal evidence from my own business, but I also, because this is what I do with my clients, I can give you a lot of anecdotes as to how that has been hugely beneficial to my clients to practice thought leading. But in line with that, a quick story about my attending a survey, or rather presentation on the results of research from an organization called Kennedy Information, which is here in New England, in New Hampshire. And some of you may have heard of it. I'm not sure it's as well known as it used to be years ago, but they were doing a presentation that I attended back over 20 years ago. And this is not their graph per se. It's just something that I pulled off the internet to represent what they were talking about. They were talking about revenue. They were talking about management consulting revenue in particular, and what's the breakdown of those on the different levels of revenue, and so the bottom was around, let's say, 150,000 a year in revenue, and then as it would go up line by line, step by step, it would go up to 250 and 300, 400,000 and 500,000. And they got to the top, the pinnacle, and they said at the very top are the biggest earners, 500,000. Now this is go back over 20 years ago. 500,000. I mean, that doesn't go as far as it used to, does it, for all of us? But that's what they were holding up from their research as being the highest levels. So they said that 0.1% of management consultants from their research at that time made $500,000 a year or more. They're talking about solos in particular. So that was, of course, very interesting, but it begged a question which they didn't answer. They just kind of moved on. And then when it was all over in the question and answer, somebody asked, but who are the big earners at the very top? Who are they? Why do they make that kind of revenue? Why are they so much above everyone else? And without thinking about much of what he was saying, the Kennedy Info rep said, well, those are the thought leaders. They're the ones who publish books and articles. They do speaking engagements, radio. They didn't say podcasts back then, but I've thrown it in because that's our language these days. But they are the ones that get themselves out there, and in particular, publish their articles, or rather publish their ideas, particularly in the form of books and articles. So that stayed with me, and I've told that story before, and I've actually gotten business from clients, from prospects who became clients and stayed with me for years because they never forgot that story and they wanted to be on that top 0.1%. Now, so where this goes from here is a framework that I created way back called the 5 Pillars of Thought Leading. And I have a couple of books of my own that I've published that go into some detail with what I call the 5 Pillars of Thought Leading, but I'm going to be telling you all the secrets in those books. So if you're really cheap, you don't have to buy them, I guess, by the time we're done here today. But excerpted from my books. And the first one is publish your ideas. Now I'm putting these in order of importance in my view. There are 5 pillars. If you take them all and you put them all together and you practice them, you're really going to be a terrific thought leader. But what's more important than others, in my view? And in my view, it's publish your ideas. So that's our bottom line. I always think of management consultants kind of like academics in the sense of, our stock and trade are our ideas, particularly how we practice them in the field. But by the way, despite that, I don't have a lot of clients. I haven't had a lot of clients over the years that are actually academics because they tend to be sort of cheap and unsure that they should part with part of their salary. So I always refer to management consultants as academics with money. So that's who you all are. So that's publish your ideas is the most important to me. The second one is speak to groups. So here I am speaking to you. You're a group. I'm speaking to you. And by doing that, if I have some ideas to impart with you, it's just like being with a client. We are creating a relationship as we also work together and build on that relationship. And that happens because we're Zoom or not, we are in a group right now, and we're starting to create relationships. Because I already have relationships with some of you, and that's how it works, relationships. So number 3 is fresh thinking. In order to have something for those first 2, it's good to consider what are some original thoughts or some new thoughts or some unique thoughts, behaviors, or whatever that you have developed. And I would just say that everybody here is a thought leader already. You just may not be letting the world know about it. So I think that the way that we work with our clients, we're all different. We're all going to work in different ways with our clients. So that constitutes fresh thinking. Now, fresh thinking is there are other ways to establish new ideas or original ideas, or what I call fresh thinking, which I'll get to in a second. Number 4 is creatively leverage the internet. Obviously, there's a lot of ways to leverage the internet these days. And when I started this, just like most of you, started your management consulting, we didn't really have the internet, and we certainly didn't have social media. So a lot of that has gotten the sex appeal, let's say, of the internet. But I'm going to go into a little more detail of what I think is truly effective and what I mean by leveraging the internet. And the last one is vigorously use the media. Now, all this means is that your traditional publicity machine, your public relations, what we think of as the media, whether it's newspapers or magazines or television or whatever, to the extent that we can utilize media, that can be effective in developing yourself as a thought leader. However, I've got it as number 5. And the reason is a lot of people make the mistake of thinking that's number 1 or that's the only thing they have to do. But if any of you have ever gotten interviewed by a newspaper, for example, and found that you were maybe misquoted, or your name was spelled wrong, or your company's name was not put in, or if you've got a book that your book wasn't in, et cetera, you know that there are limitations to using the media. You have to be careful about it. And nobody is nodding his head more than Chuck is right now. So he knows, obviously, you know. So I'll go into some more depth with each of these, but those are my 5 pillars of thought leading. So number 1, as I said, is publish your ideas. And when I espouse this, what I'm really talking about is, we'll call it third-party endorsement for having a publisher, for example, of a book. I believe that a book really puts you on top. Now, I'm going to say that I know that writing a book is not for everybody. There are a lot of people that are really never going to write a book, and that's okay. But if you're thinking about writing a book, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that there's never been a better time in the history of publishing than now to be able to produce a book. There are a couple of really strong options where it used to be gatekeepers standing between you and a publisher. And with self-publishing, that has changed dramatically. So you can do a book if you have a mind to, and if you're interested in it, and you've been thinking about it and wondering, you can do it. And I think there's nothing like the credibility. And the second part is that there's nothing like the credibility of having a book, far and above all these other things. But if you are not ready to write a book, or if you'll never be ready to write a book, or even if you have, number 2 on this list is to publish articles. There's a lot to be said for simply an article, for showing that you have something to say, and there's somebody out there who will publish it. So if you can get it published by, it could be Forbes magazine or Forbes.com, or it could be something lesser known like an industry publication. It doesn't really matter. It's just significant when people are publishing articles in order to practice thought leading. I have a client that I've had off and on for years who was not that interested in doing a book, although a book ended up coming to him after 5 or 6 years of publishing articles. But he was in the employee benefits space, and he over the course of a couple of years, I helped him get articles published in all the different areas that he was expert in. And what he used to do with those articles is take reprints of them and put them in his briefcase, and we'd go to a prospect visit or call, a sales call. What he'd do is he would wait until the conversation came around to something or other, some issue that was the focus of an article that he had written and gotten published. So he would slyly say at that point, actually, I once wrote an article on that, and I got it published in Boston Business Journal. And he would pretend that he was rummaging through his briefcase and looking for that article, and didn't really know if he had it or not, but he had every article that he had published. So he'd pull it out and he'd put it on the table, and he'd slide it across the table. And he said that article served him as a touch point in the whole selling process. He didn't expect that article to just make the prospect go crazy and say, I've got to hire you. He would slide it across the table, and the prospect would pick it up and take a look at it, and just for a second, and then go, huh. And it was the fact that it had the endorsement of a significant business publication and that he had gotten published in it. So he still does that. He's been doing it for years. So that's the power. It's one of the powers of a published article. And you can do the same with a book, but I'm just trying to make the point that it doesn't have to be a book if you're not ready yet to write your book, but you can write a book if you want to. So third is blogs, white papers, and Twitter. I got a question mark and a big maybe. And the reason is that, yes, those things are available, but I think that when we rely on those, we're forgetting about they're all self-published, and where's the third-party endorsement that gives us extra credibility? So I say, yes, these are good things, but these it's the book and the published articles in the first two bullets that are, I believe, more important in terms of establishing yourself as a thought leader. And then I would just add, but there's nothing like authoring a book, because there really isn't. And that even includes a self-published book. The self-published book is better than the one you don't have. Okay, now I'm looking for my, bear with me, I'm looking for my, okay. Yes, am I on the right, yes, okay. I couldn't find my little arrows here on the lower left. That's what I was fumbling around for. Pillar number 2, speak to groups and followers. I explained before what I mean about speaking as being significant in terms of starting a relationship and building a relationship. So I'll just go past that and list for you what I see as the main speaking venues that we can have today. It's a mistake to think that it has to be in person, for example, or you have to do a keynote. Those are the first two bullets. You have to put Zoom in capital letters with an exclamation point after what we've all gone through the last 18 months. And that's still the most, as we all know, that's the most prevalent speaking that we can do right now. But it works. We know we're doing it right now. And then keynotes are very important to do, but they're not the only thing, and they shouldn't really be seen as, if you can't get a keynote speech, then you're sort of out of luck, because I've done breakouts, and so have all of you, I'm sure. I've been on panels, and so have all of you, I'm sure. You can be a guest on a podcast. To me, that's like speaking. You could call this a podcast, except it's really a Zoom cast, but it's speaking. And host your own event. A lot of times people don't realize that you don't have to always get pulled to do a speaking engagement that's sponsored by someone else. You could host your own events as well and produce your own events. And I've done that, and I'm sure some of you have. Introduce a speaker. You know, the IMC has its annual conference every year, and what we will do this year that we did last year, and that we also did before we went virtual last year and this year, is have somebody introduce each speaker. And that gives, even for 1 minute or 2 minutes, gives somebody the opportunity to be in front of a group and to say a few words about who they are. And you would be surprised how powerful even a 1 or 2 minute introduction for someone else as a speaker, or an elevator pitch, if structured correctly, how powerful that can be. Now, when I say a great elevator pitch, I mean, join me in groaning when somebody says at an event, let's go around the room and tell us about ourselves, and how that can be just a killer in terms of feeling good about being there. So if you got 35 or 40 dead elevator pitches, so what you need to do is structure your elevator pitch in a way that gets somebody's attention. So let me tell you what my elevator pitch is and how it goes. I get up and I say, my name is Ken Lizotte. I'm with Emerson Consulting Group in Concord, Massachusetts, and I make consultants famous. And how I do that is by getting them published as thought leaders and getting their ideas out there in front of their target market, and transforming them from a best kept secret to a celebrated thought leader. And when I get up and I speak like that, the persons that might be a prospect for me can often hear the key words of helping my clients get published, or making my consultant clients famous, or whatever it might be. There are keywords or key phrases that get the attention, and that can be as powerful as doing an hour and a half keynote. So there's a lot of variety, is what I'm trying to say, in terms of speaking venues, and it makes sense to try to vary them up rather than worry about whether you have a keynote or not. So pillar number 3 is fresh thinking, and fresh thinking applied means not just I was mentioning before that your work with your clients automatically makes you a thought leader, because you are unique. Each one of us is. And if we've ever gotten not only hired by a client, but actually paid by a client, and I'm not just talking about the examples that Chuck threw out, but if we've had, which we all have, a thriving consulting practice over the years, then it shows that we have some fresh thinking that we can offer to our clients. So that's what's unique about the simple process. But if you want to go deeper than that, surveying your clients, doing some research with them in terms of the issues and challenges that your clients face, can be one way to create a report or do some research. Surveying your market in general and your prospects as well can be another way to do it. Researching a topic, of course, good old-fashioned hitting the books and academic style research. Interviewing experts for your articles or a book. You see how it starts coming around now to those earlier pillars. And lie on the ground like this woman was doing, and looking at the clouds or whatever, lying on the ground, listening to music, think, wonder, reflect. How much time do you take in your day or your week or your month or your year to think, wonder, and reflect? Trust me, I understand how hard it can be to do that, but our brains have to have that kind of space in order to have some fresh thinking. So it's important to include that in the process of practicing being management consultants. So here we are now to create, number 4, creatively leverage the internet. And here's what I think about with leveraging the internet. It's more than just tweeting, for example. The first thing is to post excerpts from your book or your published articles on your website. A lot of people forget to do that, but they should do it. And then the second one might be internet press releases. You could have press releases about your articles and your fresh thinking results. Not so much press releases about you just hired somebody, or somebody was promoted in your company, or that kind of thing. Yeah, sure, those things can make the people who work for you feel good. But what's really fresh about your life as a management consultant? And you can structure press releases in such a way that they're almost like they're written up in a newspaper. So I have examples of that if anyone wants to email me after this Zoomcast, that I can show you on how to do that. Now, nowadays we have internet press release services, wire services, and so for a fee, you can have these sent out to just thousands and thousands and thousands of websites, companies, media, etc. And number three, blogging, twittering or tweeting, LinkedIn, to me, LinkedIn is really the most important of all of those. I don't think that there's a lot of business that comes our way by tweeting, and the blogging is fine, but people have to know about your blog and come to it. So you've got to get the word out. And how you get the word out is by actively building an e-list and actively using an e-list, an email list. You all got emails for this program today, and you'll get some for more next week or next month or whatever. I have an email list that I use. Some of you probably use an email list and actively send out announcements about things. And if you've got an article that you've just published, you can announce that. If you've got a book, you can announce that, etc. But these are the kinds of things that the research shows are have the most impact. E-blasts and email lists. Much as you may feel like you get too much email, doesn't matter. We still go to our email every day, maybe twice a day, maybe 3 times, maybe 4 times. I'm on it all the time, and I'm sure a lot of you are as well. So the research studies on social media versus email it'll pretty much come up when you do a Google search that they always show that it's more powerful to use an email list than to use social media, and overlap all of these. So all of these can be helpful, and that's how you would creatively leverage the internet. So now we finally come to the poor kid on the block, as I said earlier, vigorous use of the media. Here are some things I say: media helpful hints and cautions. As I went through this before we started today, so I'd be prepared for you. I realize that most of what I've got here are cautions. That should tell you something about my thoughts about media and be traditional media. Be careful. So number one is never make a reporter wait, because they're all on deadline, and if you can't respond to them within 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a half an hour at least, they're going to go off and find somebody else. So try never to make a reporter wait. I never expect to see an article beforehand. A lot of people think if they got interviewed, it would be, just acceptable to see the article beforehand. But if someone, particularly as a journalist writing an article, sometimes they will do it, but for the most part, that's not the way it's done in traditional media. You've got to just take your chances. Number 3, do not think of the media as your friend. Remember what I said earlier. Sometimes you could spend an hour and a half with a reporter, and then your name is spelled wrong, or your name is mangled, or your company is not there. I had a client that I set up with the Boston Globe once, and we had a nice lunch with the reporter at the Colonial Inn in Concord, Massachusetts, and it went really well. And the article came out, and it went really well as well. My client, though, was a little upset with the fact that even though most of the article was great, his company was called the Arch of Leadership, and they called it the Arch of Organization or something like that. It was not at all his actual company name. So these are the kind of things that can happen with media. So it's really important to not think that they're your friend and they're going to always get everything right. And do not whine about that, about being misquoted or whatever, because there's really not going to be much that they can do about it, even when they try. They're not going to put it on the front page or anything. It's going to be a little tiny print on page 2 or page 20. Never assume that X will lead to Y. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, I have been personally interviewed by Fortune magazine, and another time by the New York Times. Never assume that X will lead to Y, because even so, I have never had my name in Fortune or the New York Times. I just didn't make the article. I didn't make the cut. Fortunately, I did make the cut in some of these other media, and that will happen to you if you do this on a regular basis. So, but the important thing again is caution. It's all helpful hints when it comes to dealing with the media is all about caution. So I think I'm almost done. I think I'm done. Just want to make sure that I am. Okay. So I mentioned that I'm in Concord, Massachusetts. And we were talking earlier about in the 19th century, we had a number of thought leaders here in Concord. Their names were Ralph Waldo Emerson, Henry David Thoreau, Louisa May Alcott, and Nathaniel Hawthorne, and a number of other folks like that. And I named my company Emerson Consulting Group because when I looked at how these folks all lived their lives, Ralph Waldo Emerson came the closest to what I consider to be a thought leader. Now, he wasn't a business guy, obviously, but he did the way he did practice his professional life was what I'm espousing with the 5 pillars of thought leading. He was a writer and published books and articles, essays, and things like that. And he was really, you know, one of the most successful writers in the world at the time. He was a speaker. He used to get on a stagecoach and go all through the Northeast United States and do speaking at these little towns. And he'd be gone for 3 or 4 months from his family, because then as now and now as then, even a successful writer didn't make enough to really feed his family. So he had to become a speaker, and it's still kind of like that to a great extent. But so he was a speaker. He did practice pillars 1 and 2. And of course, he had fresh thinking because he'd be walking around Walden Pond with Henry David Thoreau and thinking great thoughts. And to the extent that there was media in those days, he was often quoted as well. He's one of the most quoted people in our history, I think. So here's, I'm going to leave you with this particular quote that I think is relevant to what we're talking about here. Ralph Waldo Emerson, or Waldo as we call him around here, once said, "Thought is the blossom, language is the bud, and action is the fruit." Now here's why I like that in particular. You know, it sort of builds, starting out with thought leadership or thinking, reflection, fresh thinking. But what it builds the language being the writing and the speaking. But here, the last piece is so important, action, the fruit. Don't do any of these things and just sort of sit back and assume that things are going to happen. Anything you can do to overlap with each pillar. And as you saw my story about Dan Cassidy is his name, and his briefcase and his articles, that was action. He was action oriented with those articles rather than just waiting for somebody to read the article and come his way. So thought is the blossom, action, the bud, language, the bud, action, the fruit. And what I fill it in, I say for a return on investment that separates your firm from the pack by monetizing your expertise and keeps delivering new business. Once again, it is about getting them to come your way. And I assure you this works. That's me. I'm the CIO, by the way, Frank, the Chief Imaginative Officer. I am my company's CIO. There's my website, and I'm ready for questions.
I put your email in the chat also.
Great, yes. Please email if you'd like the slides, or if you'd like I've got a condensed e-version of my 2 books, which I could send your way, and
okay.
Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. We'll take a few minutes for questions, then we got to sort of past our time a little bit, but I'm okay with that. If anybody has a question for either Ken or for Chuck. I think you've answered all our questions.
No,
I have a comment.
Yes.
So, I mean, you know how they say, physician, heal thyself. This is the kind of stuff I do and help a lot of this. I work with my clients on this as well. You know, do you want to be a thought leader? Some do and some don't, you know, and so thought leader is really leading with your ideas. And of course, it's on a spectrum. But what you triggered for me, Ken, and I did a little sketch here on my notepad, it was sort of like a mind map. So imagine your blog article. Let's just be really simple. You've got a blog article, right? I'm just going to read from my notes. So you can publish your blog article on Medium. It's a blogging site that's become pretty reputable these days. And then make sure you link that back to your blog on your website. Same thing on your website. You can post that same piece on your website and say that this is a version that appeared on Medium or the other way around. Or you can just, you know, edit it slightly. Then you can go to LinkedIn, post it on LinkedIn, and then link it to featured and post it up on featured on LinkedIn, because there is a difference supposedly if you link within LinkedIn versus if you link to a website outside of LinkedIn. I think it gives more weight when you link within LinkedIn than when you link off to another website. Go figure that one out. So get it on LinkedIn featured. Then Mitch Davis and his expertclick.com. This is where now you can write that press release, as you're saying, is about your article, but it's not, you know, me about the article. It's about the topic, you know, and you make it interesting. You quote yourself, do a real, you know, full featured, all, you know, the 5 W's of a press release, and you can find all that stuff online. And essentially you're promoting this idea about the topic of the press release. Get that published out on Mitch Davis's service, and you know, we should all be on it and using it, and some of us have been on it and not using it enough. And then post your press release on your website. Then go to Twitter and decide which of these you want to link to, and it could either be, you know, your website or to and again, this is just from a single article that you've written. And this is all that leveraging that Ken was talking about. So then you can tweet, let's say, to Medium. And then, of course, when they're on Medium, they can see your website. Then, so everything sort of interlinks. But that's what that's what thou hath wrought today for me, Ken.
Right. Well, that's exactly the principle.
Yeah.
It's that, you know, I when I did put the 5 pillars together, I was trying to have a category for everything like that you just mentioned that I could think of. So there was a box for each of them. But of course, I'm very biased toward books. And what I'd say, similar to what you're saying, is if you have a book, from a book, you can carve out articles. Each chapter, for example, can be its own article. And you can send that out to your email list as you're leveraging the internet, and LinkedIn, and post that article there, and it all comes back to your book. And then somebody sees it and comes to you and says, that's really fascinating what you've been writing about and talking about. Could you come and speak? So it all starts working hand in hand.
And Ken, would it be heresy to suggest to people here that they think, oh God, writing a book, oh my God. Well, take your articles and repurpose them into a book and take it to Ken. Yeah.
You can do that. Some people do it that way, and that works for them. So, I mean, there is sort of a relatively painless way to do a book compared to maybe what sometimes we imagine a book has to be, what the process has to be.
I was going to say that's a great way of capitalizing on one article that you just mentioned, Roberta. The other comment I wanted to make is that I think everybody's been listening to Ken because it seems like everybody's publishing articles, doing speaking engagements, etc. And I was wondering, Ken, if there was any data, because you know I love data from our last conversation, on how long it takes for someone to be really considered a thought leader, that when customers actually, I mean, not customers, but customer clients actually will start coming to you.
Well,
I mean, this takes time, obviously.
You know, there's an old story or joke about somebody who's all of a sudden burst on the scene like the latest famous musician or something like that. And you go, wow, this guy's an overnight sensation. And he says, yeah, it only took me 20 years. I mean, it sort of depends, you know, it depends. But how do you get there? You get there by some of these steps we're talking about are little steps, but steps nonetheless. That's how you get there. I can't tell you that the formula is that if you write a book, as much as I'm biased toward writing books, I personally enjoy writing books myself. So I'm biased, but I still couldn't say, if you write a book, well, you'll definitely be a thought leader in like 6 months or even 6 years or whatever. No, it doesn't, life doesn't really work like that. But the main thing is that there's so many of us that do such great work. We know we do with our clients, and our clients will tell us that and hire us again and again, and they will show their appreciation. And yet we don't necessarily get the word out beyond our client list or beyond our immediate networking. These are ways to get the word out, so you're not a best kept secret. So really, it's something that is going to be. I can only think of the word exploiting, but I don't mean that in a negative way. Just getting the word out. Let's just say about what you can do and who you are. You are thought leaders already, is the way I feel about it. Just these are vehicles to get the word out.
Ken, thank you very much for both the encouragement and the practical tools, I think, to help us down that journey. And Chuck, we really appreciate your stories. You know, I think all of us can identify with some of those, and yours were definitely memorable occasions there, no doubt about it. We'll be rejoining our fearless leader, John Anderson, next August 17th. He was traveling today, but he'll be joining us again on August 17th, and we'll have a couple of speakers. We have Jerry Vieira talking about marketing strategy, maturity, and the adoption of innovation. And we have our innovation talk with Machiko Walcott, talking about and helping clarify confusion in AI and analytics. So look for more information coming about that. And we will.
One thing about Jerry Vieira.
Go ahead.
Jerry was for a number of years a client of mine. And that's why he's a thought leader. That's why you're having him next month. See, it works.
It's your fault.
It works.
It's your fault.
It might be my fault. Yeah, you better come through.
You'll be good. Well, Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time very much and your attention, and we'll see you all.
Before we go, please, before we go, NorCal, August the 3rd. I hope you'll join us for networking. It's an event on networking, but like a pro. And we've got a wonderful speaker, Miley Colmer, who is really a guru in how to develop long-term relationships and on networking. She's spoken for us before, and I put the link, it's in the chat. You can just go or if you miss it there, just email me directly and I'll send you the link.
Okay, great.
Thank you for letting me announce it.
You could send the invite out to the email list for this group. That would be helpful too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
You got all our emails.
I don't have your list. So Frank, if you just want to capture it from the, unless you're already on our list, I don't know if you are, but if you send me your name, then you'll get on our list and then you'll get all the invites.
Okay.
The reminders. Yeah.
Okay.
I love the sound of lists coming together.
Lists.
New people getting new emails, getting onto existing lists. I love that.
Okay. Good. Thank you, Roberta. Appreciate it.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Yeah. Everybody have a good month, and we'll see you August 17th, hopefully. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Bye.
So Carol, I think John was planning to get the recording at some point. And
Yeah,